Hello everyone, here I am at Holloway Prison, London, and I'm here to talk about Ruth Ellis because she was executed here on the 13th of July 1955, the last woman to be executed in the United Kingdom. So, and for almost a century this was the main women's prison in the UK, certainly the only one in London, although male prisoners were occasionally held here. So it's had a number of notable inmates. But some of them were IRA men who were held here as well. Some of the suffragettes before the First World War, campaigning for women to have the right to vote, that were committing crimes such as vandalism. Some of them were held here. They went on hunger strike. The Cat and Mouse Act was passed, properly called the Prisoners Discharge of Ill Health Act. But anyway, so back to Ruth Ellis. I wonder if we can go in. Let's see if we can help anybody escape. Yeah, go over here. Okay. The office. Hello, we'd like to help someone escape. Let us in. Well, why are they not answering? I suppose it's been closed ages ago. They said the dog's on patrol. They're not lying. I saw a German Shepherd over there. So, anyway, I wouldn't be quite so naive as to announce they're trying to help somebody escape. There are no prisoners there. So, Ruth Ellis was born in 1927 in Rhyl, Wales, to an English father and a Belgian mother. Her mother had come to the United Kingdom as a child refugee during the First World War. So Ruth Ellis, she had at least one brother, and according to Ruth's sister, she was sexually abused by members of the family. So the surname was originally Hornby, I think it was, and then the father changed the surname to something else. But when Ruth Ellis was an infant, they moved to Berkshire. She grew up there in Basingstoke, I believe. So although she's born in Wales, I don't think she was regarded as being Welsh by herself or indeed anybody else. So she was a teenager when her father died. She left school at 14, as was typical at that time. The Second World War was on. She got waitressing jobs. She moved to the Bright Lights, big city. Here she was in London. She had a intimate relationship with a Canadian soldier, became pregnant by him. It was then that he announced to her that he was already married. He deceived her in that regard, so there's no way he could marry her. And being an unwed mother was considered utterly disgraceful at the time. Nevertheless, she gave birth to her baby. Her Canadian lover, he ended the relationship. When the war came, he returned to Canada. He sent money for about a year, and then that was it. She never heard from him again. So her son was raised by her parents. So she worked as a nude model. She's got a bit part in Lady Godiva, this 1950s film about that woman, the Countess of, where is it, Leicester or something, riding around Leicester in the nude to shame her husband into not overtaxing people. And then Peeping Tom looks out when everyone else has agreed not to look at her, and Peeping Tom is struck blind. And that's the origins of the expression of Peeping Tom. So yeah, she was also a nude dancer, and that led into prostitution. The guy who'd run the cabaret where she danced in the buff, he'd also pressurized her into copulating with him. So she'd become pregnant once more. She'd had an abortion, totally illegal in those days, if there was no threat to the mother's life, which there wasn't in this case. And so she was on the game. She'd become pregnant by one of her clients. Then she met this wealthy divorced dentist who's much older than her. So he seemed a good prospect, so she married him, I suspect mainly for money. He had 2 teenage sons from his first marriage, but it turned out to be a street angel house devil, was horrific and violent, so her relationship with him broke down. He was highly suspicious, always thought that she was having an extramarital affair. I suppose he wasn't very attractive in any sense, so perhaps not surprising that she would. I don't know if she did, she was quite highly sexed. So she ended the relationship with him, and then she had another boyfriend, a guy who I think had been in the RAF, a racing car driver, been to Shrewsbury School in Sandhurst. Sandhurst for the army, yeah. He'd been in the army, not the RAF. So a quite pucker sort. Blakely was his surname, if I remember rightly. But he was treated quite badly. He moved in with her, even though he was engaged to somebody else at the time. So she'd been ill-used by others. She belonged to the fair sex. She must have viewed my lot as the unfair sex. And then she began a relationship with somebody else. So by the age of 27, she'd had 2 children by 2 different fathers, and she'd had 2 illegal abortions. She'd become pregnant again by, I think, this Blakely chap who had, I don't know whether accidentally or deliberately, ended her pregnancy by punching her hard in the midsection. So rather horrific life. and both her terminations have been illegal. That's excluding this miscarriage brought on by violence on the part of her paramour. So she'd taken up with another man, not Blakely. What was his name? His surname was something like Cassenden. And so one evening in April 1955, she cracked. So she had been given a handgun by Cassenden, her new paramour. She was consumed with homicidal rage because Blakely was carrying on with another woman at the same time. So Cassenden, he drove her to where they thought Blakely was. He wasn't at that house. So she walked a quarter of a mile to the Magdala Arms pub in Hampstead, not too far from here. And then she recognised his car outside the pub. It was about 9:30 in the evening. So she went up to him. She drew her revolver and she fired it at him. He tried to run away. He was shot. He fell down. She stood directly over him and fired into him. So she'd almost emptied the revolver. She kept on trying to fire the last one, but it wouldn't go. So she shot him 5 times, once at point blank range, so much that it had scorched his skin. One of her bullets missed, ricocheted, and it hit a woman in the hand, who fortunately wasn't severely injured. So Ruth Ellis made no attempt to escape or resist, just stood there, blinking, dazed, almost narcotized, saying, "Oh, I think you'd better call the police." And the police arrived within minutes and disarmed her. Again, she put up no fight, made no attempt to flee, and was taken to custody. And she instantly freely acknowledged everything that she'd done. So she was charged with murder. Now, there's no murder in the first degree, murder in the second degree in the United Kingdom, but it was a murder with premeditation. So the death penalty had been significantly reformed through the 20th century. Only certain categories of murder carried capital punishment, and these would be murder with a firearm, murder in furtherance of a robbery, things like that. Some premeditated ones. If it was not premeditated, then it wouldn't attract the supreme sanction. But she had thought about this. It wasn't that she just flew into a rage. Yes, she was angry, but she'd gone to the trouble of possessing herself of a firearm. It involved a degree of planning. So she was charged with murder, and Mr. Mishcon of Mishcon Del Rey, he was her defense solicitor. I can't remember who her barrister was. It was Mr. Justice Havers, who was the beak on the bench at her trial. So her defense barrister asked her, "When you fired the bullet at your lover, what did you want?" And she said, "To kill him." With those 3 words, she talked her way onto the gallows. If she'd said, I was attempting to miss him, I was trying to just scare him, but accidentally I hit him, that might have worked. She might have been acquitted. And she'd appeared in the court with peroxide blonde hair and a white dress. And it was actually the defense's plan to make her seem sort of angelic, delicate, very feminine, someone you wouldn't think of as a murderess, certainly not deserving of the rope. But obviously it didn't work. So the jury retired, and they soon came back to return their verdict of guilty. So Mr. Justice Havers duly donned the black cap. It's actually a square piece of black cloth which sat atop his full-bottom wig, and saying to her, "Ruth Ellis, the sentence of this court is that you shall suffer death in the manner prescribed by law, and may the Lord have mercy upon your soul." And then bringing down his gavel with that, "Take her down." So then she was taken away back here to a Holloway prison, where for the passage of 2 Sundays clear. Now, she could appeal. She chose not to appeal. A lot of people wrote to the Home Secretary, who was William Lloyd George, saying that there ought to be a commutation of sentence, because it was in the gift of the Home Secretary to advise Her Gracious Majesty to exercise the royal prerogative of mercy and to reduce the sentence from death to life imprisonment. William Lloyd George, he's the son of that last Liberal Prime Minister, David Lloyd George. He was a national Liberal, William Lloyd George, effectively Conservative by this time, and he declined to do so. And a leading factor in his decision not to reduce the sentence was that she'd opened fire in a crowded street. He said, "I'm not standing for that. She easily could have killed somebody else, not just her intended victim." And the other thing is, what about Cassenden? What about her lover, who'd supplied her with a firearm, driven her there, put the idea into her head to some extent? He could be charged as a principal And even if it was charged simply with accessoryship, that could also attract the same sentence. It doesn't matter if the person dies by your own hand. If you materially assist it, counsel it, encourage it, facilitate it in any way, then you also are criminally culpable. But Cassenden wasn't charged with anything. So she wasn't going to appeal. Had she appealed, that would have delayed it by a couple of weeks. Could have appealed a second time, delayed it by more weeks. Time for a reprieve campaign to get going. And the longer you left it, the greater the chance there was that you'd actually be spared, because the authorities begin to have cold feet about it, they have second thoughts, they feel bad. If they execute you a couple of weeks after you're sentenced to death, that's one thing, but then the agony of hanging on, not knowing when you're going to be topped, was thought to be unbearable and inhumane. But no, she wasn't going to seek a reprieve or anything like that, or even a stay of execution. So Mr. Mishkon, her solicitor, couldn't do anything about it. He attracted a lot of press attention, that son of a rabbi. His law firm's still going. Anyway, so on the 13th of July, she was woken early, and she had to wear special knickers, because when they'd executed a woman some years earlier, it caused her to bleed profusely from her pudenda, and apparently the wardresses apologized to her for having to do this. So another thing is, then there was a phone call early that morning from a woman who gave her name, but the person who answered the phone wasn't sure. Did she say Mrs. or Miss? Claiming to be working in the Home Office directly for William Lloyd George, and the Home Secretary had said to delay the execution, and they couldn't figure out who this was, and then they phoned back. But anyway, as they were not clear of the identity of this person, astonishingly, they decided to go ahead on time and execute her about 9 o'clock in the morning. And a crowd of several thousand had gathered out here. Some people were praying for her. Donald Soper, the president of the Methodist Church, was amongst them, saying, "This is unacceptable, no one should be executed." But anyway, so she was indeed topped. It's staggering to me that they went ahead with the execution, because what if that was genuine and it really was a reprieve? Now, these reprieves, they never came in last minute, they came days or weeks beforehand. And wouldn't you be a bit surer that if you're the Home Secretary, make the phone call yourself, send a dispatch rider, something, phone multiple times? But I mean, if they had to delay her hanging by an hour, by 2 hours, they could do it. But once you're hanged there, you can't bring her back. So she was given the short drop. I don't know if it was by Albert Pierpoint or one of the others. Pierpoint being one of the United Kingdom's most celebrated, fully licensed public executioners. So that was the end of her. She was buried within the prison walls, and that was actually part of the sentence. But in the 70s, she was exhumed and reinterred in Amersham, Buckinghamshire. I'm not sure why. I don't think she had a particular connection to that place. But her son, he later desecrated her headstone before committing suicide in 1982. So you can see a bit about her in a film called The Last Hangman, about Pierpoint. He actually wasn't the last hangman, and often that was the main image of him proffering the noose to Ruth Ellis. That's enough about Ruth Ellis. And in the 1990s, some of the archives were opened, and it came out the deliberations that William Lloyd George had undergone. He said, if we do not put this woman to death, it'll be tricky to justify ever executing a woman in future. So she must swing, and indeed she did. That's enough from me. Toodaloo.